Hi, Paul Bedford here from Retention Guru, and in this clip originally filmed for CIMSPA as a webinar, I think it was back in 2021, I talk about compliance, which has a strong relationship with as part of exercise adherence. And here I'm talking about how do you get your clients, customers, members to comply to the exercise programs or routines that you set for them when they ask you to do that. It's always been a problem it was always a problem that I faced when I was a young trainer. It's part of the reason I got into studying psychology. But in this clip, I explain some of the things you can do to improve compliance. Now, if you enjoy the content and you want to see some more, then please subscribe. If you've got comments or questions, just put them in the box down below, or you can email me at paul@retentionguru.co.uk. For now, just enjoy the clip and I'll speak to you again soon. Take care. Bye. We then want to structure client activities to improve compliance. And improving compliance is getting them to stick to the exercises. Now, one of the key elements of getting people to stick to the exercise program you've given them is they need to understand why each and every exercise relates to their goal. Because if they can't in their heads make this relationship between the exercises you've given them and their outcome goal, they drop those exercises. And that's why if you're writing a whole body approach training program for somebody who came in and said, I want big arms and chest, and you go, yeah, that's fine, but I'm going to give you legs as well, and I'm going to give you core, I'm going to give you some shoulder work. When you turn your back, they dump all the things they don't see that relate to big arms and chest. It's one of the reasons I think a lot of people don't warm up effectively, and they certainly don't cool down and stretch at the end, because they don't see the relationship or the benefit of warming up or cooling down as it relates to their outcome. They only think about it as it relates to the workout there and then. So we have to show people the relationship between their exercises and their outcome. Then what we need to do is we think about how we're going to teach this. Now, I've chosen archery because archery, I think, is, if you want to improve people's skill in archery, there's a really, really simple way of doing it. But it's not the way archery is usually taught. So I was fortunate enough to go to somewhere that does archery a little while ago as a day trial, and we stood there. We were 15 meters out for the target, and we were given bows and we were given the arrows, and we were pointed in the right direction, and they said let fly, and they flew, but most of them didn't go anywhere near the target. Now, if your first experience of the first 5 arrows is none of them hit the target, think what that does internally to your psychology. For the vast majority of people, they're like, oh, this is a mistake, I did the wrong thing, I knew I shouldn't have done this, and they start coming up with reasons that they're not being successful. Now, a simple way to improve people's techniques at archery is to do this. First of all, start them just 5 feet from the target. So they're almost on the target, and you let them do 5 arrows. Then you move them back another 5 feet, so they're 10 feet out, and you fire, and then 15 feet out, and then you fire, because they've had experience of being successful. And while you're increasing the distance, they recognize that's a challenge, but they also recognize that they need to practice more to build their confidence, and that will help eventually to build their compliance. This was a technique, and I've used this as archery, but this was a technique the US Marine Corps used to improve the accuracy of the US Marines in rifle shooting, because they'd start them off at 100 meters or 100 yards and they wouldn't hit the target because they weren't used to firing. If they started them closer and moved them back, they found that their overall accuracy went up. We have to find ways of making people successful in what they do. I don't believe in the approach which was very popular during the early 2000s, where you bring someone in and you ask them to do a lunge and you look at their technique without showing them a lunge, and then you comment on all the mistakes they're making and correct them. I would argue that actually if you taught someone or showed them it first and then let them try it, their technique will be better straight away, because they have a visual understanding of what they're trying to copy. I would then focus on small incremental things like, right, let's get the step right first. Then let's get the drop right. So when I used to teach on the YMCA courses and I used to teach the free weights to the students, I'd start with stand with your feet hip width apart. And once people have had their feet hip width apart, I'd move on to the next coaching point. And then I'd move on to the next coaching, but I wouldn't move on till they got it right. So they were successful at every stage moving forward. And yes, if I needed to correct them, I'd say, okay, that's a little wide. I need it a little bit narrower than that. And if you can turn your toes out, that's great. That's fantastic. Small incremental changes, but all positive ones, will help them be much more successful, build their self-confidence and their self-efficacy. But give people things they can be successful at. You know, basic skills plus practice equals confidence. Then when we move on to what's called the competency key, we know that if feedback is focused on individuals, dropout can fall to as low as 10%. So the feedback you give has to be individualised. Now, if you're in a group setting, that might be me looking across, seeing Phil in my class. He's in row 3, he's at the end. We make eye contact. I don't shout out his name. I just say, that's a really good squat over there. Your posture's really good. Your knees are in great alignment. And I talk to him directly without calling out his name. Now, someone who's in the front row, who's been coming for years, may be more comfortable with me using their name. But someone who's less experienced won't want to be pointed out. But I want to still find ways of praising them, particularly if I can relate it to their outcome, particularly if I can relate that to their goal.